Welcome everyone, my name is Josh and I'd like to introduce my fellow council member Nisha, who is in Melbourne.
Josh and I are part of the MFA DE&I Advisory Council. So, Media for All. What is it? Who are we? Why are you all here? Media for All is an initiative brought to you by the MFA. We'll get to our purpose in a bit more detail shortly. But in essence, this all exists as a way to promote greater diversity, equity and inclusion in our industry. Focusing on industry-wide initiatives, today we'll take you through our approach, as well as provide actions that you can take to continue your agency's DE&I journey. Before we get to that though, we wanted to talk about why DE&I is such an important topic. So often, it can feel like an area that's almost too big to overcome. There's a level of fear around it, fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of offending someone. And at the end of it, we don't say anything at all sometimes, which is even worse. But we're here today to challenge that, to start creating a more open and respectful space for conversation and sharing. We're all on the journey, just at different stages. So to kick us off, we're delighted to introduce SBS presenter and comedian Michael Hing, who is going to bring to life exactly why DE&I is so important.
Hello, I'm Michael Hing. You might know me from my work at Triple J or SBS, or you may be one of the millions of people who have not yet engaged with anything I've ever done. And to you I say, congratulations for the long run you've had, and I'm sorry it's coming to an end. Diversity, equity and inclusion are incredibly important in my life. To many internet trolls, diversity, equity and inclusion are the only way I've ever gotten any job. And to that I say, actually, I got a job at a bottle shop when I was 19 because my friend's mum ran the bottle shop. So that wasn't a diversity hire, that was actually nepotism. Thank you very much. Today, we're going to go through a few preconceptions you might have about diversity and inclusion in the workplace and hear from some of our MFA DE&I council about how different parts of their identity have shaped their stories at work and in their lives. For my part, I think it starts young. I grew up in the Sutherland Shire in Sydney, and because it's a very white area and all my teachers were white, they'd say truly some kind of ignorant stuff, even when they were trying to be nice. They'd say things like, "Oh, Michael, you're Chinese. You must be good at maths." Ugh, yuck, no thank you. Oh, Michael, you're Chinese. You can't drive. And it's like, no. I can't drive because I'm 7 years old. That's a lot of pressure to put on a year 2 student. Nowadays, I work in TV and radio, and I think it's one of the many industries that has a long way to go. Just a few years ago, when I started at the ABC, they used to have these huge posters in the foyer, these floor-to-ceiling posters, right, of all the big ABC comedy shows on there, right? Like there was a huge one of Charlie Pickering for his show, The Weekly, a big poster of Will Anderson for his show, Gruen, and then a huge poster of Sean McAuliffe, and a huge one of Sammy J and Randy. And I remember walking through the foyer. I'd just gotten a job at the ABC, and I remember seeing all these huge posters and just being like, wow, the diversity in that lineup is a puppet. Like, it's all straight white men of a certain age and then a puppet. And look, I don't want to downplay the importance of including a puppet for the puppet community. I mean, obviously many young puppets would find Randy's presence on the national broadcaster an inspiration. And look, a few years later, the ABC is making huge strides towards improving their diversity by putting Benjamin Law on literally every single one of their programs. And that's why I mostly have to appear on SBS, because you can't have both of us. I mean, it's only fair. Otherwise, we'd be overrunning the joint, wouldn't we? And if you're someone who's only now just realising that Ben Law and I are actually different people, that too is a step forward for equity. But look, the reason why diversity, equity, inclusion is so important isn't just specifically to do with my career, although, let's be honest, if I got a few more TV gigs, Christmas with the family would be a lot easier at Old Hing. No. Today, the MFA DE&I Advisory Council will have 5 things we want to share with you. Many people don't see themselves as affected by issues of diversity, equity, inclusion. But today, we want to make you more aware of these issues because they affect all of us. And genuinely, if we can get this stuff right, it improves the quality of life and work for everyone. Firstly, let's talk about parenting. What do you think of this statement? 50% of Australian fathers take primary parental leave. Do you think that's true or false? Well, 81% of our industry who completed a recent survey said false. Just 1 in 20, or 5% of Australian fathers, take primary parental leave. Shared parental leave allows for more equal parenting and career roles within families. In the most recent MFA census, 3.1% of the media industry took primary carers leave, and 0.9% took secondary carers leave. None of the primary carers were men. Let's hear from Scott now about how gender equity can affect parenting and what we should be working for in the future.
Whilst we have made some great strides as an industry when it comes to gender equality, there is still some glaring imbalances. And to me, some of the obvious ones are around caring responsibilities and parenthood. As a parent, you're often asked to choose between career and family, and it's often the mother that has to sacrifice career. And that's where we start to see discriminatory behaviours come through in hiring and career conversations. We've evolved from what we call maternity and paternity leave to primary and secondary. We need to evolve again to just primary carers, where both parents are afforded the same opportunity to care for the one child. What that does is it creates equal opportunity for caring and career, and we start to erode those gender stereotypes, and ultimately no one parent or one professional has to sacrifice more than the other.
Thank you, Scott. I think it makes sense. Like, I know, for example, when I was a kid, I was mostly cared for by my mother and grandmother. Like, they basically raised me because my dad was always at work. And I guess that kind of affected me because I grew up to do comedy, which I think we can all agree nobody wants for their child. Let's take a look now at diversity, equity and inclusion when it comes to disability. Tell me, do you think this statement is true or false? For about 1 in 4 Australians with a disability, their main disability is mental or behavioural. According to the survey of our industry, 85% said this was true. Disabilities come in many forms. Let's hear now from Patrice about what it's like to have a disability or an illness that others can't see.
When I was 12 years old, I was diagnosed with an invisible illness called lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune inflammatory disease that attacks your tissues and vital organs. Lupus is an invisible illness, meaning that I may look fine on the outside, but on the inside, my body is riddled with pain. I've had days where I have been in immeasurable amounts of pain, but I've had to play it off like nothing is wrong, because on the outside I look fine, and it shouldn't be like that. You should be able to be open and honest about your struggles and your pains. Just because an illness is invisible doesn't mean it's not there.
Thank you, Patrice. Let's move our focus now to culture in business. What do you think about this statement? In a business environment, when communicating to colleagues, it is important to be direct so you don't waste time. According to a survey of the industry, 82% of people disagreed with this statement. And look, it can be tricky, but it's important to understand how people both deliver and receive communication. Australians are what they call a low context culture, where being direct and clear are thought of as positives, but in some cultures, directness may be viewed as rude. Let's take a look.
I grew up in a family where my dad was Maltese and my mum is a Filipina. So that's really essentially evolved who I am today from a cultural communication perspective. It's literally in my blood. I've worked with South Korean clients in the past, and what I've learned working with them is essentially their communication style is a lot less reliant on things like speech and more reliant on things like tone of voice, things like posture. These are things that I had to adapt, but also, appreciate when communicating with them. And also things like I had to write many emails to get things like clarification and, many emails that may seem excessive from an Australian point of view, but from a South Korean point of view, that was just, the way they worked. When it comes to cultural communication, it's not about changing who you are, it's about appreciating the cultural setting that you're in.
Thank you, Louisa. I just want you all to know that when I don't reply to your emails, for me personally, that's not a cultural thing. That's just because I have a crippling anxiety condition and any human interaction is a genuine nightmare. Let's move on now to LGBTQIA+ issues. Is this next statement true or false? Nearly half of all LGBTQIA+ Australians hide their sexuality at work. What do you think? 84% of you said true. And according to a 2016 study, nearly half of LGBTQIA+ individuals do hide their sexuality at work. Nearly half. Why is this? Well, I think a lot of it could be because more than half, that is 60% of LGBTQIA+ Australians, have received homophobic or queerphobic abuse at work. And 1 in 5 have experienced physical violence. Those stats are across the wider country, but let's take a look at the media agency industry. In a recent survey, you told us almost 5% of you identify as gay, lesbian or homosexual, and about 3.5% as bisexual, just under 1% as queer, and about 5.5% preferred not to say. Now let's take a look at Josh's story.
As a gay man, I'm part of a minority group. But in the circles I mix, it's not a minority group that I've ever been made to feel particularly marginalised in. Granted, those are relatively metro and cosmopolitan circles, and I think it's all also largely thanks to the changing representation of the queer community in media, and particularly the changing representation of cisgender gay men. However, that's not to say that microaggressions don't still happen. They very much do, and when they do occur, it actually hurts quite a lot. Just recently, I was actually in a social setting in North Bondi, which is known to be a relatively kind of liberal and welcoming space, where I was really made to feel that my sexuality almost made me an exotic other. I wasn't being seen as an individual, but rather as Josh the gay man. I sort of became this titillating accessory for the group of people. And in this instance, what made me feel really uncomfortable was this repeated mention of my sexuality. And I was kind of struck by how odd this was, because in a regular social setting in another group, I would never comment on someone else's heterosexuality as much as they were commenting on mine. For me, the takeaway from this was recognising the ongoing experience of marginalised groups, regardless of how progressive we might feel society sometimes can be.
Thank you, Josh. Let's move on now to talk about diversity, equity and inclusion as it relates to Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people. More than half of Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander Australians are experiencing racism in the workplace now. True or false? 88% of you said true. In the latest MFA DE&I survey, only 0.36% of the media industry's population identified as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, which is 9 times below the overall population. Let's hear now from Tanya.
I am a Māori woman. I'm a descendant of the Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Mani tribe from the north of New Zealand, and I am the proud mother of a Kamilaroi woman, so my daughter is Aboriginal and Māori. Raising an Indigenous child in Australia, it really did become apparent to me, particularly because my daughter has much darker skin than myself, the injustices towards her when not in her own community. When she went to get a job, she went through, all the normal channels that you would. It wasn't until she actually went through an Indigenous employment agency that she was able to get hired. It really did make me wonder if businesses weren't hiring through Indigenous employment agencies, would my daughter, an Indigenous woman of colour, even though she has a degree, be afforded the same opportunities? What I would like to see is a world where creating opportunities for Indigenous people in the workplace, really creating opportunities for them to thrive, and also breaking down biases and preconceived notions that as a society we already hold towards actually hiring Indigenous people.
Thank you, Tanya. We're sure these findings have provoked lots of questions and comments from you, so please put yours in the chat right now. One thing we can definitely take away from today is that it's important to hear from people with lived experience in order to better understand how people are affected by these issues. We only covered 5 scenarios today, and there are many, many others. Really, today was just an introduction to these kinds of stories, which are in every single workplace. But now, I'll hand you over to Linda, Nisha and Josh. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Love those 5 statements and lived experiences. What a great way to demonstrate the multitude of different ways diversity, equity, inclusion shows up in society. With that set up, we will now spend the next 10 minutes covering our initiative and how you can become involved. But first, what is Media for All? Media for All is our brand for the MFA's Diversity, Equity and Inclusion program. It encompasses our industry surveys, training initiatives and more. What does it mean? Media for All is about making sure that those in the industry and those that we want to attract into the industry can thrive, feel heard, supported and safe to do their best work. I'm Linda, the Director of People at the MFA, and I'd like to reintroduce Josh, who is in Sydney with me, and Nisha, who is in Melbourne. Together, we will run through our industry strategy and plans. Over to you, Nish.
So what did the MFA do first? They created the MFA DE&I Advisory Council, whose role is to establish a positive guide that pushes the industry forward in the area of DE&I. This team in front of you is a gorgeous variety of people who are either representative of diverse groups or are allies of. And this way, we are trying to ensure everyone is being heard. Our ambition for this council is to create a voice that drives progress because, as you would have heard at the MFA Awards, we are the changers. And when we say DE&I, often many people think of things such as events supporting minority groups or just celebrating cultural holidays, but it's so much more than that. DE&I work can be as simple and immediate as learning to pronounce someone's name correctly, or as complex and measurable as changing corporate policy to offer equal parental leave to all carers, or progressing your company's reconciliation program with our First Peoples.
So if that's who we are, then this is why we exist. Our purpose consists of 3 key pillars. The first is that we're here to inspire, challenge, and provide guidance and expertise. We aim to create a welcoming, safe place where you can ask questions and seek counsel via your council agency representative. Trust us when we say there are no stupid questions. The second is really about the future pipeline of talent for the industry, and that we act as a platform that both attracts and promotes diverse voices. In other words, we are committed to creating a more welcoming industry for future talent, as well as celebrating the diversity we already have. Finally, we're a body for advocacy and awareness. A huge part of the journey is educating and making people aware of how DE&I impacts all facets of everyday life, just like in the examples that Michael shared. As a representative of the Advisory Council, I speak for all of us when I say that we are so excited about the journey we are going on together. Don't just take my word for it though. This is why other members are part of the council.
In 2021, I spent a total of 4 weeks in hospital. This made me very anxious that I would be judged by my colleagues for my time off, even though I couldn't control it. People should care about DE&I because when we have a greater understanding of those around us, it can lead to a stronger sense of empathy and lead to better outcomes.
When I started in media 17 years ago, I changed my accent so that I could fit in better and be one of the crew. Today, I just want everyone to be able to bring their true self to work and never compromise on who they are.
Workplace inclusion improves the well-being of all people in your organisation. The Diversity Council of Australia think it will be the most important way to attract and retain talent in a post-pandemic world. We should all care about the well-being of the people we work with. Everyone should feel included and like they belong.
Diversity and inclusion is a choice that we make every single day. And that's what we should be doing as advertisers, to make the choice to be inclusive within the workplace and also through the work.
As an industry, we sit at the intersection of commerce and creativity. This affords us a really unique opportunity to direct the attention of the cultural spotlight. In fostering a diverse workforce, we can reflect that diversity back out into the world.
That was some of the people from our council. Thanks for sharing why you care about DE&I. We all care, and I'm sure you all do as well. You know how it feels when you're not included. As an industry, our ambition is clear. What's more, by incorporating DE&I into your business, it affords you a competitive advantage by creating a truly connected workforce, one that is authentically representative of the consumers we are trying to reach. We've learnt a lot over the last year, researching what is best practice and what the role of the MFA is versus each of the agency's brands. Our role is to provide education and training, recruitment support via pipelines and best practice papers, and benchmarking data. To measure the change needed, in 2020 we partnered with Media to measure DE&I in our industry. The latest results were published in November 2021, which your agencies would have access to. We will continue to measure annually so that we can see the change needed.
From an agency perspective, it's really about getting involved in a lot of these initiatives and implementing them as part of our BAU. This includes points like recruitment policies, compliance training, and KPIs, as well as celebrating key moments in the diversity calendar. Let's take the ownership together.
Today we are launching our industry DE&I strategy for the next 3 years. Year 1 is to educate, build awareness and ensure engagement. Year 2, 2023, We plan to create programs and partnerships to attract a pipeline of new diverse people to our industry. Year 3, 2024, is to see the metrics shift towards an industry that is more reflective of Australian culture. This is not an exhaustive list. However, it does provide some priorities and a pathway towards a diverse and inclusive media industry.
So what does the first year look like and how can you get involved? The first way is by encouraging you to attend NGen and MFA 5+ events. We'll be incorporating diversity, equity and inclusion into all of these events, and it's a fantastic opportunity to hear diverse perspectives and to start a conversation with your peers. The second way is via SBS's online inclusion program. For the next 2 years, members of MFA agencies will have free access to this program, and our goal is for everyone to complete the 2-hour core inclusion course before the end of this year. And before you say it, I know, another online module. But in all seriousness, all of the Advisory Council have done this training, and it is really accessible, really relatable content. I highly encourage you to log in and check it out. After completing this training, our recommendation is to always meet up and discuss and reflect on what you have learned. Things like what was a surprise and what you can now be more aware of. There are also reflection questions within the course, so use these as part of your conversations. Core inclusion sits at the middle, but there are also other courses included that can be completed at any time. Our recommendation is to include the learning during relevant key dates to raise awareness of the subject. For example, you might complete the First Nations training during NAIDOC week. And that brings me to the third and final way you can get involved. Yes, it's a deceptively simple sounding one, but we want you all to keep the conversation going. This is ultimately what makes DE&I a priority and ensures it's never far from top of mind. The MFA will be tracking the progress of the industry as we undertake this training and these steps, and we hope you'll join us in reaching the goal of Media for All.
Thanks, Josh. So last, but certainly not the least, I'm lucky to offer our gratitude. Thank you to SBS Australia for providing the SBS Inclusion Program for free to our industry and for bringing us the hilarious Michael Hing, who did such a good job on such a challenging topic. Thank you to our friends at the Pedestrian Group for lending their energies and expertise in filming and creating the videos that you watched today. And thank you to the MFA and to our colleagues, yes, it's a self-pat, the wonderful MFA DE&I Advisory Council for being changers and sharing your vulnerability and your stories. And to all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to being part of our industry progress. Enjoy your day and see you soon.
We are the changers. We are masters on the decks, excelling every day. In an ever-changing media world, we're at the flux. New ideas, new clients, new problems, new solutions, new platforms, new challenges, new ways. No day is the same, and we may work with suits, but we don't have to work in them. We are the changers. We influence people, business, culture, and the economy. We understand who to speak to, when to speak to them, where to speak to them, and how. In order to change, move, swap, shift, hold against the tide or stop. To buy, invest, click, switch, do more, do less, or do nothing at all. We make all sorts of content, news, music, and entertainment happen. Our ideas, plans, and strategies influence people, and it's not small. Some tasks may seem small because we're not all big guns, but our work is heard and seen by millions and millions of Australians every single day. We may not save lives, who hasn't heard that? But don't be fooled into thinking you don't change lives.
Donate over 150 million meals to people in need.
I helped to develop a tool called Data Slayer.
Raise over $2 million COVID-19 vaccination shots.
Drive relevance for a next generation of consumers.
They help cultivate a fun and inclusive environment.
I support leaders within our industry to drive positive change.
I try to normalise and help people be unapologetically human.
We embrace equity and diversity.
I help launch a campaign that tells men that it's okay to cry.
I push myself to see beyond the status quo.
Giving back means the world to me. Let's keep it going.
You are a changer. Saving the world? Not all of us. But working in media, we're able to change it.